I heard that voice. Good morning. What's going on? Everybody good in the Lord today? You better bet you are. Even if you don't know it, right? Good in the Lord. Hey, this is going to be fun. Now, I said yesterday, process, and you're the content expert, and you're going to feel like the content expert today because you've got a lot of work to do. I'm just glad I'm not you. You feel encouraged? No, I'm kidding. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to be in there with you. Hey, I want to read a scripture for you today. My personal rhythm is to read through the Gospels just over and over again. So I'll read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, to start all over again. I've heard about this guy named Paul. I may try him one day. I'm kidding. But I just love, if I'm going to be a Jesus follower, I just love reading about him. And it's amazing. I probably literally have read the Gospel of Mark at least 10 times in the last year, probably the entire Gospel 4 or 5 times. But I always find something new. And so I really wasn't planning on reading this morning. I actually thought I might skip out on the Lord today and just come do this. And I felt like I needed to read it. And I read it and I just thought, this really works. Like I need to read this to you. And you're going to be very familiar with it. But I want you to just listen with an open heart to it. And my prayer is that God would speak to us. And here's how I want you to read it. And this is the way I read every day is I always read and I ask myself 2 questions. The first one is, what is Jesus saying to me? And I love that he talks to me. I don't know why he would talk to me, but he does. And the second question I always ask is, what am I going to do about it? So what is Jesus saying to me, and what am I going to do about it? And I feel like when I hear his voice and I obey him, I'm following him. And I follow him not because I have to, but because he loves me so much. I just love following him. So let me read this. If you have a Bible, open it to Luke 10. If you don't have a Bible, open your smartphone to Luke 10 or something. Or if you don't have either, just listen real closely, okay? In this text, the Lord has just sent out the 12. And they've come back and some things have happened. And now we're in Luke 10. It says, after this, the Lord appointed 72 others. And he sent them ahead of him in pairs to every town and place where he himself was about to go. I love that. He sends us ahead of him where he's about to go. No accident, okay? Okay, I lost my place. Verse 2. He told them, listen to this, the harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into the harvest field. Now go. I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves. Don't carry a money bag, traveling bag, or sandals. Don't greet anyone along the road. Now listen, verse 5. Whatever house you enter, first say, peace to this household. If a person of peace is there, your peace will rest on him. But if not, it will return to you. Remain in the same house, eating and drinking what they offer, for the worker is worthy of his wages. Don't move from house to house. And I'll just stop there. I can keep reading. Think about that for a moment. And just at your table, sort of talk among each other. What do you see there? What do you hear? Go back and reread it if you need to. But what do you hear Jesus saying to you? What might be that little nudge you hear, that little insight you gain? Okay, everybody look up here real quick. I'm telling you, tell you to get in the Word, y'all get in it, don't you? I should have known better. Telling a bunch of Baptists to open their Bibles and ask questions about it, right? All right, let me hear a little bit of quick feedback from you because I heard you starting to go, and all I wanted to do is get the motor running this morning. What did you see? What did you hear in that scripture for yourself? And probably every one of us saw something a little bit different. Similar but different. Anybody? You were saying, what did you? Pray earnestly. Yeah. What does that mean? Yeah. Anywhere where there's a movement of God, there's unusual, extraordinary prayer. Yeah, so that's a good word. Pray. What else? You look like you got something.
The need is not in the harvest, it's in the workers.
Okay, the need is not in the harvest, it's in the workers, meaning the harvest is great. But that was then, right? But the workers are few. I'm picking on you. No, the harvest is here. The harvest is great. You believe that? The harvest is great? Believe God's word? Absolutely. Yeah, somebody else real quick. Back here in the back. I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves. Yeah, he says, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be just the way you want it. Relax, enjoy yourself. This is like a cruise ship. No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Awesome. Yeah. What else? What else? I love this. Back here. That was one of the things that really stuck out at me when we talk about families. That he says, go and stay in their homes. Eat what they eat, drink what they drink. Stay there, Get to know it was almost like I was hearing, get to know your neighbor. Get to know your neighbor. Or maybe even better, be a good neighbor. What else? Somebody else. That was good. Love that one. Don't play favorites. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Good word. We don't get to pick and choose, do we? Where to go. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because he tells us not to take anything with us, right? Like, when I read that about the second or third time this morning, what I saw was like, you have no excuse. Like when I read that, it was like, he took away all of our excuses. Because my feet hurt. I don't have the right shoes. I don't have anything to eat. I might lose my position in the community or my job. But Lord, I really can't do that right now. But that's mute. Anything else? Yeah, sort of a command, isn't it? Now go. We need each other. Yeah, 72 and then send them out by twos, right? 72. I couldn't help but think these were upper room people. Like when we talk about upper room, this is what we mean, upper room people. Okay? Yep. Somebody else. Yep. Doug. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, word to the wise, don't do it alone, right? Yep. Hey guys, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Don't get sidetracked. Yeah. Go fast. Go now. The harvest would spoil in the field if it remain. This. I mean, this is agricultural land all around you. If you leave the farmers in the area, they don't leave the crop laying in the field past harvest time, do they? I mean, it would be devastating, So here's my last. Okay, so what do you hear Jesus saying? Now, take a moment and just personalize that. What is he saying to me? What's my takeaway today? What's my personal takeaway? You can use me. Me. Me? Me. Absolutely. Yeah. Then the last question, and you don't have to respond, but I want you to respond to him, and I'm going to pray for us. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do with this text, that this wonderful gospel truth that he gifted us today? He gifted this to us today. What are you going to do with it? What am I going to do with it? Okay, let's get started. Father, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your word. Thank you that we can just take a moment and read and see how, Lord, you care for us and how you've got these special plans for us, and we get to talk about them and sort of plan out, Lord, a lot of these initiatives today. But God, I'm reminded of your word where you said that a man plans where he'll go, but you determine his steps. And that, God, you are the determiner of our steps. You are our guide. You are our light. You are everything to us. You are our provision. And, Lord, you are our courageous leader. And we have courage today in bold faith because you have courage in bold faith. And so guide us today, Lord. Let there be no, Lord, I guess the way I'd pray it is, Lord, as Isaiah put it, Lord, let every mountain be brought low, every valley high, every crooked path straight. And God, let us go unencumbered. So guide us now, direct our path today, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, thank you. That's so much fun. All right, I want to do a quick sort of set the table for what's going to end up being a day of really working in it as you come today as the content experts. I've got a slideshow, and if you'll go ahead and throw that up, and go to the third slide if you don't mind, is where we can begin. This one right here. So I want just to remind you real quickly, this is what we talked about last night. Isn't it nice to just get it down to the most basic unit? And if you listen to everything, I talked about we have to answer 5 questions. You remember those questions? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? When are we successful? Where is God taking us? The what is our mission. And Chad passionately, wonderfully shared that importance of that focus. And what we call that is we look at who we are as a church. We're being us now. We're being who we are. And so this is our great permission with the Great Commission. We all have the same Great Commission, right? But as a collective body together, this is sort of our Great Commission, or Great Permission with that Great Commission. And so our what we talked about was building families, passionately following Jesus. So we got a lot of talking to do about that one. And then we talked about our why. Why are we doing it? And I love these 3 values. You remember them. You could probably close your eyes and know them. Can you do that? Just close your eyes for a minute. I know you're looking at them, but close them anyway. What are those 3 values? Generosity, relationships, generation. Now, we could have came up with 15, but we wouldn't have been able to do that, right? So that's the beauty of it. I was thinking, Chad, I was reflecting on that this morning, and one of the things that this tells me, when a church is willing to focus like this, it tells me they're serious. And one of the common problems we have, we want to be about everything. And guess what? When you're about everything, you are actually about nothing. You know what it's like. We all live that life. So back up one more minute. Okay, so then we've got what we're going to do with the team that we've been working with is talk about the how, our strategy, the why, our measures, and what we're going to focus on today is our vision, our direction. Okay? So the question, do you remember the question number 5? What was the question number 5? Where is God taking us? Okay? So this, we call this, again, the vision frame, and it's just our simple tool for leading with vision. You know, the vision that God has given us. And so today, what we're going to be looking at is what I call a visionary plan. So there's a difference between simply a vision and visionary plan. You know, a lot of times people want to have a vision statement, you know, and that's fine. You can have a vision statement, but what is a vision statement? I guess it's a statement of intent. What is a visionary plan? You know, it's an actionable plan of how we're going to get there. You know, so you probably need both. So anyway, that's just trying to sum it up. Let's go to the next slide, and let me sort of set this up, if you don't mind. Yeah. So first of all, I just want you to notice that we do have a vision problem. Oftentimes, and I'm talking not here, but just in general when it comes to vision. And here are some of the problems that we deal with, how we have to move from vision plan from vision to a statement to actual vision frame. One of the problems is we have no time frames. You know, so it's one thing to say we have a vision, but if we have no time frame, so today we're going to talk a good bit about time frames. Another one is oftentimes we have too many goals. Okay? And so what you'll notice when I share this with you, the model that I'm going to share with you, we're going to have 10 goals. Now we'll have many actions, but we'll only have 10 goals, and we'll only have really 5 goals that we ever focus on at one time. So the next slide is oftentimes it's not very exciting when we talk about vision. Another issue is team disconnect. Now, this is why it's so important that you are in this room. You could be doing a lot of different things today, you know, like watch football. I know all you ladies are heartbroken. Now, some of you are the biggest fans, right? But it's so important that, and part of the heartbeat, as I understand it, behind the Leadership Summit is it's not me, it's we. You know, that it's important that it's all of us doing together. So we want to make sure we have a plan where we're the team, we're connected. Oftentimes our vision is not shareable in number 5. It's not shareable. And so we want to make sure that what we have is very shareable. If you heard Chad talk about that one thing last night, very, very important. And so you can see them all summed up in the next slide. I'll keep going because I don't want to spend much time on this. All right, then, so the result of these things is oftentimes generic vision. And what I constantly say to people, generic vision is like having no vision at all. And so we have to move from the general to the very specific if we're ever going to get anything done. And that's just as true for the church, maybe more so for the church. And so when we think about generic vision, here's how it shows up sometimes. By the way, these are wonderful statements. Don't throw anything at me, this morning. But when I'm illustrating generic vision, most churches that I go to and talk with and work with, I'll go, hey, what's your vision or what's your mission? They'll say, love God, love people. And I'm like, that's awesome. What does that mean? Love God, love people. Okay, but what does it actually mean? Oh, love God, love people. Well, wait a minute. Maybe you're making a pretty good point here. So a lot of times we hide behind our church language, our religious language. Instead of dealing with diversity, we say we love everybody. Instead of getting specific and say, I'm going to build a relationship with my African-American neighbor or my Muslim neighbor, we go, I love everybody. We have to get specific in order to get traction or to get anywhere. So you sort of get the idea. I won't beat that to death. We'll skip this next slide, next two slides. What I want to show you, go down to the picture if you would. Just keep skipping through for time's sake. So whenever we look at vision, this image represents how we develop, how vision works. If you look at this picture, what do you see? What do you see? Somebody just answer out. Tell me what you see. What? Oh, you see the river. And I thought I saw some trout in it. You know? Yeah, absolutely. That's what you see. Very specific. You see a sunrise. I've never noticed. You know? But you see, way back there, there's a sunrise. Okay? See what? It sure is, isn't it? Yep, absolutely. What else do you see? You see what? A church, a bridge. See any mountains? No kids. Who said that? How many kids do you have? 2? Okay, I thought you were going to say 8. You should have not said that with only 2 kids, okay? So my point is, our eyes are a gift from God, and there's a relationship between, what we find here is there are multiple horizons connected here, and it was funny, not funny. It was interesting listening to what you did see and how you saw it, you know, and that goes back to that we all sort of focus on different things, but. I want you to notice a couple things about this. Go to the next slide. The top part of this, nobody really mentioned just the sky, but there's the sky, the blue sky, infinity and beyond, right? Well, that's a famous biblical passage, right? Infinity and beyond. Where did that come from? I can't. Proverbs 17:3. No. Okay. But when we look at beyond the horizon, then the amount of the clarity and the amount of time, there's a relationship between time and clarity there. You know, if you're going to go to beyond the horizon, it's going to be the furthest distance from you. You know, now infinity you're never going to get to. But if we were just trying to get beyond those mountains somewhere, you could actually get there, but it would take you a long time. And so when we think about vision, we talk about the fact that there's this faraway vision that we're trying to achieve that we have to begin with. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you go on down to the next one, so this is up at the top, well, and then you see there's another, we would call it background horizon, but it doesn't take us, we got the church, we got the mountains, but there's a distance. You know, if we want to get to the mountains, there's a time relationship with it. There's certain things we've got to do. There's a journey we've got to plan. There's a way we've got to navigate it. But you don't navigate it by starting back there. I mean, that's the travel brochure. That's where we're going, but there's a lot of activity that's got to happen before we get there. If you go to the next horizon, that's where you catch the good fish, by the way. Yeah, and we call that mid-ground. That's sort of the immediate, the here and now, you know. And then you come on up and you can even see the pebbles, the details, you know. And so as we develop vision, that's how we're going to develop vision, from that far away all the way up to what is it that we've got to do right now. That's a visionary plan. And so we call that the 1-4-1-4, and I'll show you why. Just keep rolling if you will. So go to the next slide. If you look at this, so the way we did, you see my frame again? So with that picture in mind, this is the way we do vision as an organization, how we help churches everywhere. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to paint a picture. We have to discern a picture. Let me say it. First of all, whose vision is it anyway? It's God's vision, right? And so beyond the horizon for us is the most complete picture that we can have of where God is taking us in that time frame, 5 to 20 years. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a running number. Usually we pick a number. You know, like for your church, it may be a 5-year plan. It may be a 10-year plan. It could be a 20-year plan. I don't like 20-year plans because I feel like I can just go home and watch the ball game when I got a 20-year plan. There's no urgency behind it, you know. And so we're going to take a moment and look at the vision that the team's been working on and trying to discern related to that 5 to 20. That's the one goal. Then if we're going to get to that, then there's some, the way I like to put it, so that's where God is ultimately taking us. Then if we're going to get there, then what are the things that we have to accomplish in the next 3 years in order to get there? To me, these are the mountains. What are the rocks we've got to address? What are the obstacles we have to overcome? What are the mountains that we have to climb if we're going to get to ultimately where God is calling us as a church to be? And so we'll look at that for a minute. Then if you go on down, this is just a planning model, that's all. To the next slide, this is what we call mid-ground vision. This was the brook there, the river, creek, whatever it is. And the mid-ground is a 1-year horizon. And here's the question, and this is where we're going to sort of live our life today in a lot of ways. Here's the critical question that we ask. If God is leading us to the top horizon, if these 4 rocks, and I'm going to show you some stuff in a minute and make it a little bit more tangible for you, if these are the 4 rocks we've got to overcome to get there over the next 3 years or so, then what's the one thing? This is the power of simplicity. Not what is the 23 things we need to be doing, but what is the one thing that what is the one thing that we could focus on as a church, that we could be about? That if we really focus, really put our energy in as God leads us, then it would move us towards our ultimate vision like nothing else. And so we'll be introducing that to you. And then the last thing that you see there is the bottom 4. And the bottom 4 is what we call action initiatives, our 90-day initiatives. And this is those pebbles right up on you. You know, this is the thing right in front of your face. This is the thing you have to do day in and day out now if you're going to get there, you know. And so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this vision, and not talking about, but working on it. And working on it and saying, okay, this is, if God is leading us in this direction, then how do we actually get there? And that's where we need your input. Now, go on to the next slide if you don't mind. Just keep going. Okay, so here is the information that, here's what the vision team has been working on, or the team, that staff, and this cross-section that Chad was telling you about yesterday. And so all we have here, we don't have the details. Details will be forthcoming, and even what you tell us here today will help feed into some of that. But what we have here is this is that 5 to 20 year look. This is that picture of what we believe, and I use we because that's how I'm referring to it. I include myself here. But it's what we believe that God is showing us where He wants to take us as a church, based on all the work that we've done, all the discerning that we've done. And and you'll notice the family theme is still there. Our mission, passionately, the passionate following Jesus, families passionately following Jesus. But so that's the what, but this is the where. I mean, if we did that, where would we end up, in other words? And so you'll see this. We will be a church filled with people committed, and tell me if this sounds like you. It should sound just like you, I think. We will be a church filled with people committed to making disciples, meeting needs, transforming families that pursue Jesus for generations to come. Does that sound like you? So we're not out here trying to rediscover or we're not trying to come up with something new. We're just saying, God, who are we? And what would it look like if we leaned into that and let you take us fully into that? And so none of this should surprise you. So the first question we ask is, God, where are you taking us? What is it? And again, the language, we will be a church filled with people committed to making disciples, meeting needs, transforming families that pursue Jesus for generations to come. You can see the relationship between that and the mission. The next question is a much more practical, tactical question. And so the question we asked, remember the mountains now? And we said, okay, if that's sort of our horizon, beyond the horizon storyline, then what are the mountains, what are the big pieces that we've got to address over a course of 3 to 5 years to get there? So these are like big rocks, okay? And these are not things we're going to work on today, but these are things we just need to be aware of. And we identify four things that sort of come front and center to living out our vision. And one, the wording we used was install a mission culture, and we could even say a family mission culture. But the idea behind here, I just wrote the word, I added the word, so Chad, don't kick me out, upper room, just as an illustration. But what we're saying here is that we just need to get, a big rock is getting everybody in the upper room. That's the rock. How do we get everybody? And I know that's an idealistic statement, but how do we get more people? How do we consistently, how do we intentionally move people who just sort of show up and like to consume to the front lines of what Jesus is doing? In the neighborhoods, in the homes. How do I get myself in that position? So that's one of the rocks that we've identified. The second one was align our staff and leadership, and I just wrote the word pipeline. And the reason I put the word pipeline there, I was trying to think of a way to illustrate it, but it goes back to what I said last night, and I think it's indicative of most churches I'm living with. There's always that, you've heard of that 20% that do 80% of the work? That wouldn't be true here, would it? My wife said there's just me and her in the home, and she would say it's true in our home. She does the 80, I do the 20, right? But irregardless if it's 40-60, if it's 50-50, or if it's right the opposite, it's 20-80, 80-20, whatever that looks like. Let's face it, Jesus in His prayer said we needed what? He said, well, not in His prayer, but He told us to pray, in our prayer, to pray for what? More laborers, right? We just read that. And so one of the things before we read that scripture was, as we talked about, hey, what would it take? And we said, hey, we've got to get all of our staff and all of our leaders and more leaders and all lined up with where we're going and pushing in the same direction. And that's what we're talking about here. And it's not even that we're not, but if God has given us a focus, then sometimes it requires refocusing. Number 3 was focus our resources and partnerships. And I just added the word strategic generosity. Again, I was just trying to, even as I was thinking about how to share this, think of words to describe it. But I think in your last summit you talked about eliminating debt. And you brought that debt way down. But it's not done till it's done, right? That if God is going to use us in this community with family, and one of the things that we're going to work on today is how do we care for our church's family? How do we care for our community families? Then it's going to require resources that maybe we haven't allocated before or considered. I don't know what they are. I don't have an agenda here. But I'm just saying we felt like that the team felt like that, hey, we just need to make sure that we're in a day where everything has to be focused. And then the last sort of rock that we talked about was advancing a family disciple-making model. And I just wrote the word tools and resources. How do we resource a family disciple-making movement. I mean, think about it for a moment. I just love the way that sounds. You know, I mean, what if you had a movement, a disciple-making movement among families inside this church and outside this church? And so the rock is, what are the tools and resources we need to be more proactive with that? And you're already a disciple-making church, so that should not be a hard one to figure out. So that was so we began there. We talked about, hey, our sort of far out ideal vision. We talked about some of the rocks that we'd have to address over the next, 3 to 5 years. And then we asked that important question, what is the one thing we could do now that would really get the ball moving? Now, the way we do planning is we don't want to just pull one of these down and say, let's focus on it. But we often think about an initiative we could do that would chip away at all of them. And this is a one-year initiative, think of it like a one-year focus. Okay? And then next year, the team or a different team would come together, the staff would come together and say, what's our focus going to be for the next coming year? That's going to move us closer to our vision. So it's sort of how it works. And so here was the mid-ground statement that we made, and you're going to work with it today. So keep this in mind. You might even want to write it down, but it says over the next 12 months, one-year initiative, right? Mid-ground, this is the brook, the creek. Over the next 12 months, at least half of our families will develop a meaningful, lasting connection with at least one disengaged or struggling family in our community for relation building and prayer. Now that may sound simple, but this was what we talked about. Said, what would happen? And we'll take 100% if some of you want to push back at 50%. But trying to be realist, what would happen if half of the people in our churches was going, in other words, doing exactly what I read a while ago? What if we could mobilize a movement together of people who intentionally were connecting with people disengaged from Christ in the church, struggling in life, and entering into a meaningful relationship with them, of prayer, of service, of relation building, of sharing the gospel, inviting and bringing to church, seeing their families transformed. That's the sort of the idea here, okay? And then we'll keep going here. Then the last thing we looked at is we said, okay, so by the way, the top 1-4, as we call it, is conceptual. The bottom 1-4 is tactical, so it's what we focus on, okay? This is where the work gets done. And we said, okay, if that was the case, then what would we have to do to accomplish this? And I don't know that we're, and by the way, we spent very little time on that, intentionally. We just gave it some headings so that we could divide teams up and work. And this is where we really need for you to help us. But if we were to actually engage our people 50% in intentional and call them new relationships, then what are the things that we would have to do? And we talked about communicate, and we use the word family here a lot, but communicate to our church family. Like, how do we communicate in such a way that everybody can get it and get aligned and get going? What does that look like? What does that entail? This, and by the way, the time frame for the middle one is what? 1 year. The time frame for the bottom 4 is 90 days. We call these 90-day initiatives. So the idea is we've got a year. So here are the 4 things that we need to accomplish in that year. They're big things. There are a lot of things up under them. But these are the 4 big things that we need to accomplish in sort of 90-day increments if we're going to get this done. So it's just a division of work in some ways. Now that doesn't mean that one can't take 60 days and the other 120, and it doesn't mean that one of them won't have to be worked on the entire time, but there's usually in our minds a focused 90 days of really heavy lifting and activity that takes place. So visionary plan. Vision doesn't just happen. We have to work at vision is the point here. So number 2, care for our church and community families. I love this one. And when we talked about it, a bunch of planners in a room, sometimes what we do is we go right to the obvious. And, this initiative appears to be about building relationships out there. But we also recognize, this is what I love, is that because of where we are, anytime in life, but especially now, there are people in the church that are hurting. There are people in the church that are missing in action. There are people in your local body that needs caring for. Some of you need caring for. And so I love it that the team says we've got to care for our people. But it doesn't end there. And so the focus is on care for our church and then care for our community families. All kinds of needs and opportunities. And you have a long history of caring for that community. But how can we better care for families? How can we reach out in this specific time and not be generic about just responding to needs, but saying, hey, we're going to focus on these few needs and really make a difference. Number 3, the third initiative, and so some of you are in the communication team, some are in the church team, the community team. Number 3 is mobilize our church family. Like, how do we activate this? How do we initiate it? How do we get people, identified? How do we get people trained? How do we get people equipped? How do we get people doing this? How do we communicate? How do we celebrate? You see, there's all kind of issues here if you start unpacking this. And this is why you are here. And then the last one is prepare our homes for our next guests. And, how do we better prepare our own church home? Maybe we're already prepared. You've got a beautiful campus, by the way. I love this facility. Or the things internally that we need to do, just corporately, to be more prepared for maybe people who aren't church broke yet, people who aren't exactly like us. But that will never happen. See, here's the thing that I always say is the reason, and you do know, I showed you the numbers yesterday, churches are not growing. And the church in America is not growing. It is in decline. And I always say, you know why we're not growing, don't you? You do know that, don't you? Why? You want to tell me what? We're not sharing. That's a good reason. Absolutely. The way I like to put it, I was just set up, but the way I like to put it is because we've reached everyone like us or everyone who wants to be like us. Everybody who wants to be Baptist is probably in a Baptist church today. Same thing for the Methodists, same thing for the Presbyterians. Everybody who wants to be Christian. And so unless we're sharing, unless we're going, unless we're building relationships, unless we're learning how to be a good neighbor, and that's what that initiative is really about. How do we prepare our homes? How do we become a person of peace in our community? A place of peace, our home. And so those are the 4 or 5, I guess in this case, nuts that we're trying to crack today. And so that's where we're going. So we're going to spend our energy on that bottom 4. And that's probably all I need to share with that slideshow because we need to move on to work. So let me tell you how we're going to do it, okay? Chad has already, and the team has worked hard to put you into groups. I was not a part of that. So if you don't like your group, it's somebody else's fault, okay? Just try to get to know them. Just try to be a good neighbor, okay? All right, and then, so what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do today, okay? Right here. You're going to work in groups all day long. We're going to work, we're going to report. We're going to work, we're going to report. My preference would be for us all to work in this room. That's my preference. I don't think I said that before. And the reason it'll just be logistically easier to get back together, report, and it'll be a more efficient time management issue. And so so I've got, there's 3, let's see, 1, 2, 3, there's 4 exercises that you're going to do today. So we're going to have 4 different work times that we're working through. I'm through presenting, we'll be reporting, but no more presenting. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to want you to do, I'm going to have you work, and by the way, we got the pictures up. How about that? Oh, we're really getting it going now. So the first exercise we have is called the 4 helpful list. And we need this is a perspective exercise. It is designed to give us good information about going forward, but it's also designed to sort of get us into it, and really into the exercise. And so here's what I need for you to do. You're going to, somebody who has better handwriting than I do, you need to sort of be the scribe in each group. You all have notebooks, not flip charts, and I want you to draw out this chart. We'll leave it up here so you can see it, okay? Look, I see you squinting. Is it that bad? Yeah, so let me tell you what's on there right quick, and you can write it down if you want to. But the 4 helpful list, just the diagram itself, is across the top. I wrote 4 help. Don't worry about it yet. I'll help you get there. 4 help. Let me give you the exercise, and then we'll talk about setting it up. 4 helpful lists across the top, and then whatever group you're in, whatever initiative you're working on. Okay? Then just draw X, really, sort of a cross right through your pages, and then there's 4 boxes that we're creating. This is the 4 helpful list. So the first thing I want you to do is look at what works. So we're talking here about communicating to our church. This is about talking about what do we already have in our church that works in the area of communication. If we're going to get people on board with this initiative, what can we maximize, in other words? Okay? Does that make sense? Somebody give me one thing that you could maximize in your church already when it comes to communicating to our church family, this particular initiative that we're talking about. Sunday school class. Hey, very good. You got a bunch of them, right? Got people been coming to probably the same Sunday school class faithfully for a number of years. People who already have a relationship. So it'd be just wouldn't be wise not to maximize that system, right? And that's what we're talking about. It's going to filter through both of those. Okay? It's going to be in your church already when we talk about what you can maximize. It's what's already happening out there that will make this initiative better. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, is sort of the thinking there. Okay? So there's some things already in place. You may not be using them for this particular family initiative. But you're saying, hey, we got a good Sunday school system where the best communication happens. And so the action is we've got to develop a plan for how we communicate this stuff and how we dovetail with Sunday school. All right. The second one is what doesn't work. What doesn't work? You may have stuff that you're doing right now that doesn't work. And you're going to know it probably better than the staff knows. Sometimes. So what doesn't work? What do we have that we're putting a lot of energy in? And just to be honest with you, and again, we're focusing on the initiative and communication. This is not a time to say, I don't like this about the church, I don't like this about the church, and I don't like this about the church. But it's about, hey, what do we have that in this communication that we can use? What do we have that needs to be changed? It's not working. And so if it's not working, it needs to be dropped or it needs to be changed. The third question that we're going to ask is, what's missing? What's missing? Like, in other words, what do we need to add? If we're going to be effective in our area that we're talking about today, to see this family initiative, 50% of our families engaged in at least one new relationship, what do we need to add in the communication? Like, for example, I would obviously think of something like, hey, if you're not telling life-changing stories of life change in a compelling way on a regular basis, you probably need to introduce that into your church ecosystem. You follow me? I mean, what could be more powerful than telling stories of new people and relationships where God is doing something to motivate people to be involved? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And then the last one, what's confused? What needs clarifying? Now, what I typically find is, you won't necessarily populate all of these real heavily. You may have a lot of what is working, or you might have a lot of what is not working, or what is missing, a couple things to clarify. But again, this is about walking around and getting a 360-degree perspective. Now, let me share with you quickly what I want you to do. Go to the next slide. So when you're doing this first exercise, you're going to filter through these 4 things, and the next, there we go. Sorry about that, Chad. Get your exercise in. And then the next slide, do another slide that put it up at the same time on your wall. This is non-bleed paper. It won't bleed through on your wall, okay? And write the word, for helpfulness, communicate our church family core issues. So as you work on those 4 boxes, there are going to be some core issues that come up. And I want you to write them down, whatever they are. Okay? We're not making any kind of decision right now. We're just doing sort of blue sky. So just write them down. And I just put a sample here, like on the first one, I put the obvious one. What is a core issue to a family initiative in today's world? Probably defining what family is for us. What do we mean? How do we want to include people? What do we mean? What's our brand when it comes to family? What are we saying? And so that's probably a core issue. Again, that would come out of any discussion that you would have. There are other core issues, And I want you to write those down. All right, then when you finish that, that's all I'm going to ask you to do. Then we're going to give a report. And that's where what I'm thinking is we'll just leave our work up where it's at, and we'll move from group to group and let you give a report. Okay? So that's why I want to keep it in the room. Okay? Whenever I work with groups, if I can do that, it will work a little bit better. And we're not so many that we couldn't do that. Okay? And it'll keep us moving, and it will be quicker than pulling it down, bringing it up here. Do you think we can get by with that, Chad?
I think we can.
Okay, we'll try it anyway. If not, we'll pull them down and come up here.
So let me clarify, David. They're working specifically on the issue in front of their team, not everyone working. Yes, okay. So real quick, let's go ahead and divide around the room. Where are my Gold Star guys at? Austin and Roy are going to be leading this one. Austin, what are you guys covering? What's your topic?
Okay, let's go ahead. I think we got the majority of people back in the room. So let me get everybody's attention here real quick and tell you what we're going to do now. We're just getting started. Hey, thanks for your work, your hard work there. We're going to be up and down a lot. You're going to get your steps in today. How many of you keep up with your steps? Some of you do that. So last night I was talking to my wife, and she had our grandson, 6-year-old grandson, and he keeps up with his steps. It was the end of the day, and he had 19,900 and something steps. And I thought, oh, to be young again, Like if I did 19,000 steps, I would die, So, but today we'll try to keep it under 10,000. How about that? So that's usually my goal for the day, 10,000. Guys, what we want to do, this work is just going to build upon, so hang on to your charts. We're going to send you back with them. I was hoping we could just move around, but it would probably be just way too much standing and moving, easier to come back and forth. But what I want to do is just get a quick report from each group, okay? And there's not a right or wrong way to do it, but what I'd like for you to do is highlight key things, and especially what I asked you to do, and I want you to keep that with you the entire day, is that those core issues, okay? So as you are talking, there's just some things that really pop up that you don't want to lose in the noise of everything else. And those are core issues. They're probably things that'll make it on your action list at the end of the day. So you might want to share some of those core issues. You might want to share some things about something that you find that really is working well. There might be something really strong, obvious that's missing. So if whoever's giving the report would identify what area you're looking at, and that will be helpful. And again, our mid-ground initiative is engaging 50% of our families in reaching at least one person in the community that is struggling or disengaged, and these initiatives are designed to help us get there. So who's going first? You're standing up. Come on up. Do you have a mic? Do we have? Oh, right here. I guess you're going to do it right there. Is that right, Chad? Right here. We're good. And if you got some real good feedback, you can give it, but no booing, please, okay? No, I'm kidding. Okay.
How about now? Can you hear me now? Good. Okay.
Loud and clear.
Well, I've been told I can project, but I'm glad that I have a mic. So our particular focus is on mobilization. Some of the things that we looked, my name's Les, by the way. If you haven't met me, that's because I'm a pastor of another church. So what works? What we see ministry through small groups is very good, communication-wise. The connection that we're finding within those small groups, similar wants and desires, I don't know how to put it, interests, that's the word I was looking for. Also, we'll talk to that in a second, but then nursery and child care to enable adult participation. So down here, what's missing? Additional volunteers. That's one of the things that we talked about. Now, anybody who is in ministry or is seriously involved in youth group or children's group, even music ministry, we're desperate for volunteers. And as a pastor, we're desperate for volunteers. So how are we going to communicate those additional volunteers? How are we going to get the word out so they want to go and volunteer? Opportunities for families, community service. We mentioned working with another congregation to feed the homeless. Could our small groups individually pick something that they can impact the community? Let's see. Ability to communicate church needs. And in this case, we talked about volunteers. That was a big thing. But even think about an event. I know we do it on Facebook and we do it on the wall and we do it, but can we communicate it better so that we have max participation? And what does that better communication look like? Okay. Then this is church-wide. I think everybody can agree with this one. And I mean, when I say church, I mean big C, like the universal church. But college-age singles and divorced people. We don't have anybody, as far as I know. I bet you're out there. You're just not raising your hand, and I don't blame you. Okay, but how are we going to take care of this need right here? Okay, so what doesn't work? Working alone as small groups, age-based groups, where, like the one person said over in our group, change to interest or affinity. Theirs is focused on they have small children, and they're able to work together with that, and they have the same interests. Guys like to hunt, guys like to go fish, they're in forestry, outdoorsy kind of guys. And then, of course, here's our gap. This is in this group, single college, 20-somethings, people that are just getting out of college and trying to start their career and have no connection with their communities. And so what's confused? What do we need to clarify? Clear definition of small group and the size of that small group. When does a small group get too big? And time to split. Sometimes it's going to split just on its own, but should we have a planned time that says, okay, you guys have gotten this, we need to split. So here's our core issue: define family. What does a family look like? There's the corporate family, the body, that we would call Gillionville Baptist Church, but then an individual or group of related people who have a need for Christ, love, and our love. Connection points, competition for time. If I don't have it on my calendar, guess what? It's not happening. And it's the truth. Family opportunities. How can a family serve together? Apathy. How do we get people excited? And then finding the true needs of our community and church and how to meet and engage those needs. And that's what we came up with.
Okay. Yeah, so any quick feedback? I'm going to move on pretty quickly because we got to hear from a lot of folks, and we're going to build off of that, so hang on to that work, okay? There's another group that did mobilization, right? Yeah, I want to hear that next. Just gives us a good contrast. Yeah, so thank you. Give them a big hand. Awesome. Thank you, man. Okay, it is pink for yesterday was like big breast cancer emphasis. You recognize that, didn't you?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, I thought you
absolutely.
did.
That was my.
Thought you did, man. You look like you'd be right in tune, man.
Yeah, you see my soul. So we thought through this about how, when we're mobilizing our church to do anything, what works. We agreed. We hear internally, externally, we hear that our hospitality, our greeting and welcoming of new people is typically strong. We have a great coffee station, first impressions. Kudos to our Discovering Gillionville. That is awesome. Our socials, our fellowship opportunities, large group, small group, that's wonderful. Our live streaming, our ability to project out into the community, that's good. Preaching, thumbs up. Missions, forming community relationships. What doesn't work, or where we see that we need to continue to improve, is with our connectivity. We're good on the welcome, we're good on the hospitality, but how do we get people to take the next step? How do we get them from just coming in the door and having a seat to having a relationship? So that was kind of echoed with what's missing. How are we following up with guests to help them take that next step? There were a couple ideas that were pitched. What about a church directory where we had the ability to line up names with faces, assuming that might be digital? What about something as simple as name badges? Could we get everybody on board to actually wear a lanyard or a name badge where people can learn other people more quickly? How do we discover or come to find out the needs of families? Young families who are walking in the door with little children. What are their needs? Older families. How do we discern the ways that we can serve our folks internally who are walking right onto our campus? A greater focus or intentionality in mission mobilization through our small groups. Theoretically, that should be happening anyway, but maybe not 100%, so some focus there. And with that in mind, some type of everyone in ministry or everyone serving everywhere, an intentional kind of data capture where we're able to align people, their passions and talents and skills with opportunity and need. How do we get people engaged? And also with that, how do we train? How do we train people to do the things that need doing? We've got also a kudos for our communication that it has improved. Our social media presence has improved greatly over the past few months. But in our communication, can we communicate faster or sooner when we have big events coming up? Our young families especially say, man, we already know what we're doing this summer. So if the church is doing something this summer, we need to know now. So our communication sooner, one of our youth said, hey, we would like the portal open up on Ask Anything sooner as well, so we can submit questions for our Q&A forum. And what is confusing? We believe our church center is successful, it works, but we're not at 100%. We know we still have folks that are confused by it or they can't get the tech to work. So how can we do even better there? Same with our planning center, which is a little more of an internal platform for us to use in planning our services. We still want to get everybody 100% on that. I mentioned with the iPad stations in the children's building, sometimes there are some struggles using those. And just the debate over live streaming. It's convenient, but it is not church. So we discuss that for just a second. Our core issues, again, the connectivity and how do we get people not only through the door, but how do we really foster intentional, meaningful relationship? Taking that next step, is there a relationship pipeline to work people through? And communication, just echoing to hear things sooner and maybe more thoroughly.
Okay, thank you. Comments, any thoughts? Core issues, let's talk about core issues for a minute. So just to remind you what we're talking about is we're saying our mid-ground vision, our 1-year focus is on seeing at least half of our families developing meaningful, lasting connections with disengaged or struggling families in our community. In our community for relationship building and prayer. Okay, I just want to remind you of that. So then we're saying, hey, one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to mobilize our church family. And that's what we've been talking about. So thinking that what are the core issues are there any core issues that we need to reinforce or anything missing, anything comes to anybody's mind, we're helping one another now. Hey, it's got to be simple. I'll tell you the principle to effectiveness is getting simple. It's got to be simple. Whatever you do. So we don't want to be complex. We want to be simple. Thank you. Something else. Core issue for mobilizing our congregation to engage with disengaged and struggling families in our community. Core issue. I think there's an obvious one I want to address, but I'm waiting on you to point it out.
The connection.
Yeah, connection.
We're kind of getting to hours now, but we do a lot of things, but Brian was talking about the young family coming on campus. What's the follow-up? What's the connection?
Yeah.
Are we connecting them and being purposeful about that continued follow-up and that relationship, which is we've listed as one of our values and identified as one of our values?
Yep, absolutely. So the core issue, I think, for all of us, and this is a core issue, is we've got to think, how do we go to them, not how do they come to us? Okay? So a lot of what we're talking about is what we need to fix inside the church, and which is part of it. You know, if they were to come, we want them to have a wonderful experience, you know. But the exception is going to be the person who just shows up. That's the new exception. Whenever someone shows up and you say, hey, I'm David, tell me about yourself. Oh, I've never been to church before. I haven't been here in 20 years. That's a miracle of God. You're having a divine moment. You know, so we've got to get out there. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to define your objective. And so mobilization, you need to define that based on some of the work we've done. I don't want you to come back and say, mobilization, we want to create healthy systems within our church to give people positive experiences. That's not a good objective for this initiative. You know, but what we want to do is we want to develop and implement a specific strategy for equipping our people to become good neighbors. Right? Something like that. Okay, well, you'll get to figure it out. But I'm just trying to point something out, point us in the right direction. Okay? Anything else, core issue? All these are important, so I'm not casting a shadow on anything, but I want you to see that very, very important issue right there. We have got to get outside this building.
I said we've got to be willing to do life with people who aren't like us.
Yep.
I have a fear of bringing people into
Yep.
our home who don't follow Christ because of the influence on my children. And then we are going to have to be willing to go into their home, which means I have to take my children there too.
Yep.
And it's scary because I don't want
Yep.
to expose them to things they shouldn't. But in order to bring them here, we've got to be willing to bring them into
Yep.
our home and to be willing to go to
Yeah,
theirs.
big deal, big deal. You know, and what that really means to me is we've got to equip our children to be missionaries where they live, work, and play from a young age, so that they're not getting that side of it, they're getting the missional side of it, you know. Yeah, but those are legitimate concerns. This is messy business, by the way, you know. Anybody else, real quick? We're going to move on. We're going to run out of time. Good work. Good thoughts. This is about perspective right now. We're going to move to the next level in a minute, so that's the reason I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback if I feel like I need to and want to hear your pushback and your affirmations. So let's go to our next group. Let's do care for church family. I think we actually have two groups doing care for church family, right?
We just starred kind of stuff we wanted to go over because we have a lot. So we're care for church families. What works? We said our Bible study and the content of our small groups is really good. The youth and children's department, the senior adult ministries, they're all top notch. What doesn't work? We said engagement outside of our age groups. So basically, you know, like young families not really getting together with older families, learning from them, things like that, vice versa. Communication, we think there's some significant gaps in kind of, I think what's been echoed so far is people not knowing what's going on, when it's going on, how we're getting information for people. What's missing? Information gathering and follow-up, kind of like what Brian said earlier and some other people said earlier. If we have a new family come in, you know, yes, we're hospitable, yes, we're nice initially, but we're not really following up with that. We're not being intentional with it. And then we said adult discipleship and outreach with families who are disengaged. So basically, families who, I think Pastor Roy said we have about 1,200 people on roll here, but, you know, most Sundays we have way less than that. So reaching out to those families, adult discipleship, like we said earlier, there's a lot for the youth and children and senior adults, but we're kind of missing aspects in between that. And then what's confused, we put being intentional about things because we do have really grandiose ideas and good intentions behind everything, but it's being intentional and following through with that. And then our core values, please don't fall. No engagement / disengagement outside of our small groups and our age groups. We're not getting information on new families and no follow-up with them, kind of things we've already stated. And communication and what are the needs.
Head church care.
Care for our church family,
Yep,
right?
care for the church family. I'm already starting to hear a lot of things come up multiple times. So we went through what works. We feel like care within small groups works really well. We have a lot of prayer support. Within those small groups, we have fellowship meals, but where Miss Cookie's card ministry, I don't know if anybody's ever gotten a birthday card from Miss Cookie Smith, but that's a pretty fantastic thing. Things like that, Babel bottle ministry, that kind of thing. So that's what we feel like is working within our church care and how we're taking care of our own church people. Meal trains, that kind of stuff. What doesn't work? Breakdown in communication. All right, so sometimes there might be a need within a small group that doesn't get completely taken care of, or it's bigger than the small group can accommodate. We're not doing a good job of expanding that communication out and engaging a bigger group of people to take care of those needs. So a breakdown in communication, care for singles, care for college age, so that's that single, divorced, college age group that we've heard about already. We don't really feel that we see a whole lot of connection and things for them. Connecting, caring for new faces. Let's see. What's missing? A system for identification of needs. So that kind of comes back up here to the care within the small groups. If we don't have the ability to fully take care of that need, we're not doing a good job of getting it out to the church. Connecting people, system for connecting people. Focused support groups. So what we're missing, we feel like, for instance, birth announcements, ex-military. We were just kind of talking with Doug, and we were talking with Morgan, and we were just kind of saying, hey, what did we miss out on here? The Maury's recently had a baby, and we were just kind of talking about, how did you feel? Did you feel taken care of during that time? And she was like, yes, absolutely. But maybe everybody didn't know we had a baby, or, maybe we need to do some sort of like birth announcement kind of thing. It's a big idea there, not necessarily a detail. And then Doug saying, hey, I'm looking for a fellowship of brothers that are in military, ex-military. Doug is in our Wednesday night men's group, the M46, where we're studying on being better fathers. And he's enjoying that group. He is. He said, but there's also just a different connection that he can feel with like a military group. There's things he can talk to with those guys who are brothers in military that he can't necessarily talk to with us. And so different little focus support groups would be something that's missing. Confused, what's confused? Opportunity to engage in church care, training for technology use, so being able to use the electronics, keeping it simple. Let me just jump to this back page real fast. So the core issues, we define family as those people who care for you and whom you care for, those in whom you confide, those who you love and support, people you can trust, and those who live under the same roof. So we feel like that's a good definition of family. But then what are the core issues within the church care that we're kind of realizing? Reconnecting the disconnect. We need a bigger group than just a small group sometimes. Some of the people said, maybe bring back a bulletin or bring back an easier way of assessing information. ID platforms, forms of community. I don't remember what that was. Identify. Identifying the ways that we're being communicated on different platforms so that you can choose the platform you want to engage on. Go for it.
And then be consistent with the information. If you are sharing something via a social media platform, not everyone is on social media, or as Ms. Leah was expressing, we're not all savvy in that area of life. And so if you offer us an email, would you please share the same information? And so it just really comes down to more effective communication.
Yeah. And I got two more I'm going to hit right here, and then I think this will be good because I think these are really important. I think we talked in our group about possibly thinking about the idea of re-identifying some of the small groups. For instance, the small group that I'm in Jay and Ivy's class for forever and ever and ever, we were called the young married couples. We're not young anymore. We're not even close to it. And so, I think we need to re-identify some of these small groups, like to encourage a community of all ages. It doesn't necessarily have to identify as 20s to 30s or something like that. Maybe identify the small groups a little better. And then connections within the church for new members, visitors, people who are fairly new on campus. Somebody mentioned something about like a mentorship idea. I think they had an experience where in a previous church where when a new member or a visitor came on campus, they were, I may get this wrong, but somewhat assigned to an established member as a mentorship type relationship so that they don't just fall through the cracks and they don't get left behind.
That's good, man. Little cheer here. That was the comment of the day right there. It's amazing how we name our classes. I think I'm still in the youth group, at my church. Oh, yeah, you'll be bald and about 1 foot in the grave, and you're still in the young adult class, So that's awesome. I love it. All in my mind, right? So core issues. I had a couple of them on care for our church family. That seems like a big deal, especially today. Any other thoughts real quickly? Any just really super quick thoughts? Again, I want us to be thinking about how do we move that to an overall objective or objectives. What are we actually trying to do? We're sort of all over the page right now, which is what we're doing, is sort of getting perspective. There's two things that you said that really stand out to me. One was just use the word support groups. Like there are groups that are among us that we tend to miss if we don't target. And I think the other big concern, like when I think about an objective, is our, it sounds like we got, one of the things, core issue is we do a really good job of caring for people who are in groups, So that's good. We don't need to spend, an incredible amount of energy on that. But is everybody in groups? So I would think that a couple of core issues is we don't even know who we need to care for because we probably don't know who's amongst us, who's not in groups, who's not here every Sunday. So that'd be a core issue to me. And then I want to see for this initiative, maybe this initiative looks a little bit more like caring for those who are part of our church family who aren't plugged in, People, and they're especially identify, like, what if we did an assessment? I'm just talking out loud here, rambling on, but what if we did an assessment and was able to determine who's really going through something as a result of COVID, For example, I lost a sister during COVID. You don't know that. You shouldn't know that, But there's a good chance that most people around me don't know that. Even the people I'm in somewhat of a relationship with at church, they don't know it, So there are people out, others maybe here or among us have lost jobs during this season. Maybe some are really dealing with panic, with fear during this season. We could just go on and on, but it seems to me the thing that stands out to me about this is that when we talked about caring for our church family, is there's an opportunity to care like never before. And there are a lot of people have turned us off that are amongst us because they feel like we don't care. Right? You hear it all the time, right or wrong. But now we have an opportunity to care. That's all. So I'm thinking initiative. What's my objective here? My objective is to make sure we identify everyone in our church ecosystem that might have a need, and especially those who are unplugged, and really reach out to them in a practical, caring kind of way. I'm rambling, but I'm just trying to give you ideas for when we go into the next exercise. Okay? Any other thoughts? You see where I'm headed? I'm not wanting to just reinforce everything we're already doing. What's insanity? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing, over and over again, expecting different results. So I'm trying to think a little bit outside the box, okay? So I'm thinking about people who are not here, okay? All right, let's Let's go, oh, you know what we should do now? We should care for community families. Yeah, that's the one we should do now. Okay, so we talked about caring for our church family. Let's talk about caring for our community families.
Ma'am.
There you go.
So we have a multi-generational presentation.
Awesome.
More on that in a moment. Did
Too
everybody
young-
hear the 30-somethings say they're not young anymore? Any disagreement from? Just want to get that out there.
Hey, Jeff, all I see is two young men standing up there.
There you go. So we listed what is working, and we have a lot of programs that are reaching off campus or either bringing individuals to our campus. Just hitting on some of those quickly. Whiz Kids, some of these COVID has impacted, obviously. Rehoboth, the Appalachian Backpacks, the Samaritan's Shoebox, Samaritan's Purse, seasonal events, Easter egg hunt, fall festival at times, and again, some of these are, schedules have changed now. VBS Disciple Now is the participants in those are bringing other individuals to campus, sending encouragement packs recently during COVID and sending some gift packs, et cetera, to healthcare workers. And then mission trips, both domestic and foreign, that we're reaching off campus.
So now we're getting on to what we think is missing or what needs to be added on to. So we think that there is a significant need in the college-age outreach. We were discussing how some churches will do boxes for their college students where they're just packing little things, a snack bag or whatever, just to say, hey, we care for you. Church-wide knowledge and support for issues in the church. Anything that the church needs, that there's a solid way of communicating that to the entire church so everybody knows the issue. Church neighbor support. So what does Mr. Jeff need, and helping get a solution. So outreach to single moms, the non-traditional. We're, like Mr. David was saying, we're really good at ministering and helping people who are like us. So having an area where we're outreaching to people who are not like us is very important. Generational unity. That's very important to have people who are older pouring into people who are younger. When we're doing the Finishing Well series, Pastor Chad was talking about, it's not about just gathering all the information and hoarding it. It's about bestowing it upon people. And so how can a Mr. Dewey pour into a Brock Donley? So having those opportunities. What doesn't work? Being able to change, being able to make the tough calls, being able to make the decisions. Follow up to whatever we're doing. So we have a church event, a new person comes. What are we doing to ensure that that person feels heard and that that person feels seen? And need identification. So being able to recognize when there's a need that we might not traditionally be seeing.
Yeah, good job.
Really, and there's obviously a lot of overlap occurring through these, but some of the ones that rose to the core issue, the communication of just the events, the activities that we have going on, both within the church, and so we get that support for that. When we went through the programs that we have, we had 10 folks at our table, and each time somebody mentioned a program, there was one of the 10 that said, I'm not sure what that is. So just even knowing what those programs are within the church, but then also getting that information outside the church too. Follow up to the programs and activities that we have. That when we do get people on campus, I think it was Austin that said that we really do a good job of hospitality and welcoming them to campus, but making that connection. I heard that word several times. Making that connection and be sure we have follow up with them. We have graduation ceremonies for Whiz Kids with those folks on campus, and then that child ages out of Whiz Kids, and we seem to lose touch with that family at that time. Easter egg, we get folks on campus. How do we follow up with them? So we do a really good job at that moment, but how do we build that relationship? And we had a really good point at our table. One of our participants challenged us, how are we fitting these across our values? So the generosity, and a lot of these things are generous, but the relationship was kind of rose to the top. Are we really making that connection when we encounter that individual and really following up for the purpose of building that relationship? So,
Yep.
And then we're back on the generational unity. It is important to realize that it's good to have community with people your age, so you are investing in people who are like-minded, and so you can pour into each other. But it's also very important to realize, as I said earlier, that it's not about hoarding the information and the knowledge. So you're having older people really pouring in and developing a relationship that could be very meaningful in that child or that young man or that young woman or so on and so forth. So that would be our...
Yeah. Great. Super. Thank you. Is it Caleb? Well, what's your name? Caleb. Yeah, my grandson's Caleb. It's a great name. How old are you?
I'm 14.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. You did a great job. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Keep it up. Go for it. Go for it. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so we're talking about caring for the community. Any other just core issues, thoughts, or anything? Again, we're going to sort of move from the broad to next thing we ask you to do is objective, and, I just want to encourage you, what are some, what's our objective with the community? Think in terms of what's the few things we can do? What's the one thing we can do? Because one of the things I think about as we have these conversations, somebody got to do all this stuff. So what, it's all, so what's the one thing, or we, our objective is to, focus in on some, and by the way, one of the things I hear a lot about is communication in all the groups. So my thought is one of the reasons we have communication problems is we're communicating so much, which means we're doing so much, and that's where, when we think about what we're doing, do we need to refine that? Do we need to focus that? Do we need to focus zero in? And it doesn't mean that somebody comes to us hungry, don't feed them, but, if we're ministering to, say, non-traditional families or single moms or whatever, it doesn't mean you ignore everybody else. But can we get really laser focused and really make a difference in meeting this neighborhood initiative? So just some thoughts to think through. Okay, let's keep going. We've knocking them out. Somebody come talk about prepare our homes for our next guest. Okay, thank you for sharing. Oh, there we are. Another Auburn Tiger fan. Come on up. Sorry. You don't have a weapon on you, do you? Yeah, that's a weapon, right?
What about this? Ooh, yeah, that one works. Go Dogs.
Hey, I'm with you, brother. I'm
right.
with you. I got relatives that pull for Auburn. I don't understand it.
My name is Jay Chupp, for those of you that
pull
don't
for
know
Auburn?
me.
Huh?
I have been here for 13, 14 years, roughly, at this church. So listening to all of the other talks so far has been very intriguing because obviously we didn't all talk together, but the theme resides through every thing that everybody said so far. So we were prepare homes for our next guest. What works, we've heard this over and over and over, is friendliness, small groups, facilities, security. Security was mentioned as far as the children's building goes. I know that was a big thing when we redid that building. Facilities are great. It is a draw for people when they come in for the first time. What doesn't work? not actively seeking the disengaged by bringing them into our homes and building relationships. I know that the past couple of years, it seems like we've been disengaged. That was beyond our control. I think that has weighed heavily on a lot of the themes throughout the morning so far. And we'll hit on that as far as our core issue. What's needed or what's missing or need to add? Identifying new people, connections, church fellowship, church directory ironically came up. I thought that was kind of funny. That's been mentioned a few times. I think the last time we did that was like in 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. But it was kind of funny that came up a few times this morning. Identifying new people, that is something I think we all need to do a better job of. I think greeters, kind of don't know. Not everybody knows in this room where each class meets, who's in what class. Tom kind of hit it on it. We were the young married couples and have been that way for as long as I've been here, so 13 years. And that class just kind of built and built and built and built. It was a bucket. It was a catch-all almost, because people didn't know where else to send them. But we've got other classes, and that's been mentioned. I mean, Alex and Austin lead a class. They're the young married couples now. And Ryan is in our group, he and his wife. They've been coming for a year. And in our group over here, he was meeting people for the very first time in our church. It wasn't like that when I came 13 years ago. I think that's one thing that's missing. Chad's been talking about the legacy and leaving. When I started, our small group had older couples in it that were there to kind of shepherd and mentor us. Some of those people have moved on. Actually, all of them have moved on that were in that class originally. But that's one thing that kind of got brought up a couple of times in our group, and I thought that was a really good thing that would kind of help bridge the gap between 25 and 30-year-old couples all the way up to people that are in their 80s now. Just getting those connections and building the body of Christ. Clarify what's confused. Hospitality across church, again, was one of those things. The app, that's one thing Miss Lee talked about, and that's been hinted on a couple of times. What is that? Where to go, a map. I know that's been talked about several times as a map, whether it's, at the children's building, at the entries here, or on the app, or a combination of all those things, so people do know where to go, where classes are meeting, and times and all that. Oh, it fell. I'm the one that made it fall. Core issue. Like I said, we don't know each other. That was kind of the biggest thing. We're in silos. Like I said, everybody's kind of in their own silo on Sunday mornings, Wednesday evenings, but outside of that, we don't take time to make or develop relationships with intentionality. I think that's huge. I think Tom mentioned it. Doug brought it up, having a group with like interest. Alex brought it up in our group. She's going through something. Who can I reach out to? Who's somebody that I can call that's, maybe not my mom, but somebody that age group that I can confide in that, help build a relationship with. So that's the big things that we came up with, and kind of summarize all of this. COVID, and I told them I hate talking about it. I don't like talking about it. I wish it'd go away, but it's the reality in which we live. It's what we've been dealt over the last 2 years, and I do feel like it's had major implications on not just our church, but all churches. So that's what we came up with.
Read your statement back where you talked about what was missing on the first page. I just want to see the difference between it and the one you end it with, because it felt like it was a little bit different.
Which one?
What's missing?
Identifying the new people when they come in, connections, as far as making that connection with first-time guests and making sure that we, actively engage them and help
Right.
draw them back.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, it was not work, the one that not work. You're right. What doesn't work?
Yeah.
Yeah, read that one for us one more time, if you don't mind.
Not actively seeking to disengage by bringing them into our homes and then building relationships with them.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that really feels like the core issue. You know what I'm saying? Like, if there was a core issue, is we don't know our neighbor, not actively getting to know new neighbors, or, and I don't know that you may live in Atlanta, we don't know our neighbor. So let me just say that, that's just sort of our culture. Here you may be more apt to know your neighbor, but do you really know your neighbor, is the question. Yeah, so good job. So again, we're going to move towards objective. What's our objective, okay? What's our objective here? All right. Any other thoughts about this? Anybody want to say anything? Let's go to the last one, which is communication. Communication. And so it's communicate to our church family about this. We're talking about this initiative, okay? How do we communicate this initiative to our family of 50% of our families developing meaningful, lasting relationships with unengaged people?
Well, obviously, we're seeing a lot of overlap with a lot of things, but for communicating what works, we have multiple platforms that seems to be working as far as communication, whether that's email, text, mail outs, phone, things happening within small groups. Those things are around. It's not a complete list, but there are multiple platforms happening. What's missing? Let's see, a leader-assigned church bulletin. We should have put dots here, so bullets. Church bulletin, correct software, a way to survey and ask, kind of feel the pulse of the church on kind of what people are thinking. Really probably some more social media ads, not just to the church family, but ways to communicate on social media that goes outside of the church family. A small group, this was something interesting, a small group bulletin or a handbook, because it sounded like between the small groups, the communication they were even wondering what the other small group was doing, whether it had to do with missions or somebody stopped coming to their group. There was an assumption maybe they just shifted to another small group, where in all actuality they didn't. They just didn't feel welcome, or this wasn't the right match, or whatever. And they just thought, well, they probably went to another small group. But that was a way that we thought we could communicate better. We talked, the word bridge came up a lot in all of what we spoke about, but communicating and training better bridges between where we are right now and where we want to be. But that has to do with training, whatever the platform. Another good way of communicating, having intentional supper clubs. I think dinner 8 is what the church has had in the past, but just sitting down with one another, that's something that, whether it's a Wednesday night or another day or night of the week, sitting down with a meal with someone. Something that's missing is video capture of Bible studies. For those who can't come maybe during the week for Bible studies, capturing that on a video and making that available to those who aren't able to make it. What doesn't work? In-house advertising only, kind of. We might use, hey, go talk to Roy if you want to. Well, who's Roy? If you're new here, or go to the Church Center app. What in the world is the Church Center app? So that's not working. We've got to do better with some of that insider language. Bridging a bridge to people coming into the church. We have several people who said once again didn't feel connected. I don't know where to. If they're not in a small group, I don't know how to get involved. So helping bridge that. What's not working is timeliness and planning. Like I think Brian mentioned, some families have the next several months planned already. And if we're telling somebody about an event or a gathering coming up in a week and a half, it's not even being considered because we already know what we're doing. So being a lot more timely in our advertising. And then just making sure that our website is updated, knowing that you can trust the website when you go to it and say this is up-to-date information. What's confused? Church Center app, once again, we've said it, we've talked about it a lot, but what is that? How do I get to it? What's interesting to me is that people that I speak with, they want to learn, they want to grow, but they may even don't know the basics of how to use their phone. I'm like, forget the app. They don't know how to, like, what's my password? I'm like, I can't help you with that, but that's real stuff. I've had several people come to my office over the weeks and say, I want to learn, I want to grow. And this isn't just people who are retired or older. This is younger people, too. They're like, I want to understand more about this Church Center app. Leadership and in that, and so we have somebody out in the hallway who can help clarify some of the confusion on a Sunday with some of these things. We may have overlapped some of our core issues, but maybe some of these are, I don't know, we're kind of writing about a bunch of thoughts, but dealing with assumptions. There's a lot of assuming going on that people know what's happening, and that is a major issue. Take your pick, whichever direction, but there's a lot of assumptions going on. Leadership follow-up, unpacking the details. One of the things I think, Randy, you mentioned, it was so wonderful to have people who've been within Gillionville's church body for the past 6 months, 8 months, year, 2 years, and they were able to tell us, this is what confused me. We did discover Gillionville, but from there, it's an information dump, and we didn't know what to do after that. So Pastor Chad had pulled beside them and said, here, let's connect you to them. I think this would be a good connection. So that was helpful, but we need to do better with that. Care groups came up a lot, really just having, even if someone's not involved in a small group, how do we get them connected so someone is looking out for them? Celebrating the moments in life that you want to celebrate and pulling beside them and grieving with them in those moments too, but being more intentional in those care groups. And then one of our issues that we realize is the back door issue. The back door is wide open. People come in and they may float around and don't get connected and say, you know what, I'm just going to go out this door. This door is wide open. So how do we help engage within that and close that door so they can be a part?
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Yes, sir.
Core issues, any thoughts? Any other thoughts? Yeah, so let me once again, because I'm going to set us up for the next little exercise. Chad, tell me about lunch. Yeah? Do we need to is lunch ready or is it not ready? All right, that's fine. That's all I need to know. Don't say anything else. I don't want to tempt anybody. We'll stay engaged because I think we can do this next step really super quick. And then lunch is about what time, Chad? 12:30. Okay, 12:30 is perfect. Everybody make it? 12:30? Sugar's running sort of low. Okay, so when I think about core issues with communication, I mean, there's lots of issues with communication, right? There always is, because we're trying to communicate too much. I already said that. But so what we've done is we've sort of taken a 360 view of our initiatives and through the lens of where we are as a church. And now I want to get laser focused, okay? Laser focused. So the next exercise is going to require some honing in. All right, so like when I think about communication, so the question is, if we're gonna get at least half of our families to develop a meaningful, lasting connection with at least one disengaged or struggling family in our community, I don't think it matters that we have a better app. Now, do you overall need to fix that? Probably so. I wouldn't have one if it wasn't, you want it to be right or it's just going to frustrate people. Now, can you use that app to help mobilize people? Yes, you can. But I'm probably thinking, again, just to illustrate, here's where I want you to think. What is the what is the objective? What is sort of the one thing we can do? Or maybe it's two or three things, but I want to keep it on one because I want to keep it super focused. But hey, what is the one thing we can do in the area of communication? What are the couple things we can do? Like one thing might be, just to give you an example, I'm thinking that we're talking about families all over the place. This is probably new language that you're still trying to grab hold of. We're talking about engaging the community and struggling families. How do we brand that and package it in a way that we can deliver it with clarity to our body and move them, as I said before, from the lower to the upper room? How can we get not 50%, but I'll take 50%, I think 100%. How can we get 100% of our people aware of what we're doing? Does that make sense? Because me standing up here, or Chad standing up here on Sunday morning saying, guys, we want to challenge you today to be engaged with your neighborhood, is not going to exactly move the needle. Everybody's not going to be here. Everybody's not going to remember. So how do we develop, a sense of branding, communication that's very specific to this initiative, that is loud and clear? Again, I'm just thinking out loud. Yeah. Yeah. What are the things that we need to do? What are the elements? Personal communication, a good brand, a consistent, means. So I'm just, again, so here's what we're going to do, okay? We're gonna, I want you to get back in your groups, and then we'll go to lunch after that. And I'm going to change my format here a little bit because I want to get really hyper-focused right now. And I want you to, as a group, some of you will be more engaged than others because this is a hard group exercise, and it takes a little bit of a certain wiring to do it. But I want you to write, for each group, I want you to write an objective statement. Okay? So all you're doing is focusing in and saying, this is the one thing that we've got to do. And, if you end up with more than one, I'll take it. But by objective, I want you to keep it focus on action. And so it may sound something like this, that our objective is to develop and implement, boom, whatever, however you finish that. It doesn't have to start and end that way, but I want it to be more focused on what you're accomplishing. So in communication strategy, what is our objective? To develop a communication strategy for our family initiative that includes new specific branding and next steps language. I'm making stuff up, okay? Might not even be any good, but I'm just saying I want you to think that way. I want you to think focus, focus, focus now, okay? I want to challenge you to think about the initiative, okay? Don't try to take everything we're doing in the church and make it work better. But what is it that we can do that in our category, again, it's a statement, it's a definition basically, that will allow us to accomplish this objective under the category that we've been given. Okay? Now, there's no right or wrong way to do this. This is a work in progress. But this is just to get us a little bit more focused in because we're about to go back out again. We're about to go back into that sort of broad look at things. But I want to get focused in for a minute. So we started out here, we're going to come into here, and then we're going to go back out here. Okay? So it's just a process. So get back in your groups. I'll walk around. Chad will walk around. Jeff will walk around. And if we can help you, we'll help you. And this is where I like to really get involved anyway. So I'm here available. So don't hesitate to ask.